Good morning, everyone. I'm Congressman Joe Crowley, the chair of the Democratic Caucus, representing the 14th Congressional District in parts of Queens and the Bronx in New York City. We had a very spirited discussion this morning in the Democratic Caucus. By the way, I'm joined by the vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, the wonderful Linda Sanchez from the great state of California. We had a very spirited discussion this morning about the Republican tax scam bill that is going to be up on the floor this week. Both Ms. Sanchez and I last week spent the better part of our week going after this bill, attacking this bill in the House Ways and Means Committee, where not a single Democratic amendment was accepted on party line vote by the Republicans. And the final passage out of the committee also received zero support from the Democratic side of the aisle. And in large part because this bill is about rewarding the wealthiest in our nation, as well as special interest corporations at the expense of working Americans, working class Americans. We know that in my state alone, that 22% of New Yorkers, middle class, will see a tax increase anywhere between $1,000 and $1,200 a year. We know that 36 million Americans will be affected by a tax increase if the Republican bill were to become law. We know that teachers and their supplies would lose their tax deduction. We know that veterans would be hurt because the tax deduction for hiring veterans disappears. We know that students who have student loans will be devastated. Any student earning less than $80,000 would lose their tax deduction on the interest of their student loans. And the list goes on and on. We know that seniors will be hurt. We know that the poor will be hurt because ultimately what will this do? It will blow out the national debt by an additional $2.3 trillion. And in doing so, we know our Republican colleagues will come back to us in a few months or so and say, we have this huge debt. We need to make drastic cuts in Social Security, in Medicare, and certainly in Medicaid. And it will devastate those most in need in our nation. And that includes middle-class individuals whose parents find themselves in nursing homes today in terms of the cuts to Medicaid. So this bill is devastating. This bill is ill-spirited, ought not to have been brought before the Ways and Means Committee in the way in which it was. But besides that, the damage that this will do to average Americans is something that should not be tolerated. They also do away with the estate tax, which affects 0.002% of Americans. They also eliminate the deduction for state and local taxes, affecting states like California and New York, but really all states where there is a deduction for state and local taxes, including property taxes. All of this, again, to help the wealthiest in the United States get a tax break. It's really an obscene bill, and we hope that our colleagues on the Republican side in New York, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in California, in Illinois, and elsewhere understand the impact this will have on many of their constituents if they vote for this Republican tax bill. I also just want to speak a moment about the issue of DACA. We know that the president has created a crisis for some 800,000 individuals in the United States today, whom we call cultural Americans. They are Americans in every form but a piece of paper, giving them the legal right to remain in the United States. There was an October 5th deadline, and we know that a number of dozens of individuals who had filed through the post office, their application was received by the Department of Homeland Security after the October 5th deadline. And the Department of Homeland Security is saying that those individuals are no longer eligible for DACA applications. And we believe that that's simply wrong. The standard that is used for taxes, the standard is used for so many other requirements by Americans is the postal date itself. And we think the postal date ought to be honored. The post office has admitted themselves that it was through their error that these applications were not received by the October 5th date. And we do not agree with the decision by the Department of Homeland Security not to honor those applications. We believe those applications need to be honored in the spirit of ensuring that everyone who ought to be entitled to make application by that October 5th deadline, that their application be recognized. With that, let me turn it now to my friend and colleague from the great state of California, Ms. Linda Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and good morning. All week last week was tax. Both Joe and I serve on the Ways and Means Committee that marked up the bill. And I want to make it crystal clear that the Republican tax fiasco is not a reform, it's a nightmare. Working families get shafted. In fact, 36 million middle-class households will see a tax increase if this Republican bill becomes law, despite the lies that have been told by Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, which they've had to walk back. Remember, initially they said everybody was going to receive a tax cut if you were in the middle class. They've had to walk that back because the fact of the matter is that's simply not true. The entire underpinning of the Republican bill is based on a fiction. It's based on a wish, a dream, a desire to have these unrealistic growth in this country, when most economists agree that their projections for growth in this country are pie in the sky and not obtainable. So we want the American public to know that this bill is harmful, it's mean-spirited, the bulk of the benefits go to the people who need the relief the least, further proving that the Republican Party is completely out of touch with what middle-class Americans deserve in terms of tax relief. With respect to the DREAM Act, which Joe just mentioned, there are only 15 legislative days left in 2017. There is not a lot of time to get a legislative fix for DACA before the end of the year. So if Republicans and the president are serious about wanting to do something to provide certainty to DACA recipients, and if they're not just paying lip service to the 800,000 dreamers in this country, then they need to come forward with a serious plan immediately. Time is running out. There is no time to wait. Democrats stand ready to get this done, but nothing will happen, quite frankly, if the Republicans choose to continue to sit on their hands. We are waiting for an opportunity to get this done. And yet again, the Republican leadership, despite what they say on the one hand, has been unwilling to work with us to get this legislative fix passed. I want, again, folks to be crystal clear on what the impediment is, because if a clean DREAM Act were put on the floor today, I believe we have enough members of Congress that would vote for it, that it would become law, and yet here we sit and wait for the president and for the Republican leadership that controls the floor schedule to actually act on something that America needs to get done. We are tired of waiting. We're tired of lip service. We want to see action now.
En español, por favor.
Sí, ok, en español. Estamos esperando que los republicanos en serio se sienten con los demócratas para tratar de llevar a cabo un alivio para los soñadores en este país. Quedan solamente 15 días legislativas en este año. No hay mucho tiempo para pasar una ley que da este alivio. Así que si los republicanos y el presidente toman en serio este tema y no solamente están mintiendo a los 800,000 Dreamers, necesitan trabajar con nosotros y traer un plan y negociar con nosotros en serio para alcanzar este alivio. El tiempo no nos alcance, así que estamos pidiendo que los republicanos dejan de sentarse y hacer nada y que de veras proponen un plan que podemos trabajar con ellos en pasar en la Cámara de Representantes.
No mucho tiempo. Any preguntas, questions?
I guess to the Congresswoman,
Yes.
because of the issue of the Hispanic caucus. You have your bill, Congressman Cordero has his bill, and there are other bills around. Is this issue about him getting into the Hispanic caucus, could this be a problem for all you trying to agree on something, even if it's done before the end of the year or before March, as Speaker Ryan comment in español too.
Okay, well, let me try it in English, and then I'll try to translate it into Spanish. So I would just say this. The Hispanic Caucus has always been united on trying to pass a Clean Dream Act and give dreamers the certainty that they need. The issue with Congressman Curbelo is just background noise. We continue to push for negotiation with the president and with the Republican leadership. If Congressman Curbelo is serious about providing relief, then he should work with us instead of complaining in the media profusely, which is what his preferred sort of action seems to be. En español, el Caucus Hispano siempre ha tratado de pasar el acto de soñadores sin otras cosas que quieren añadir. Queremos un proyecto de ley limpio, como se dice aquí en Washington, D.C. Tenemos muy pocos días para alcanzar eso. Y si el congresista Curbelo está de veras quiere ayudar en ese esfuerzo, pedimos que nos ayuda más que andar criticándonos en televisión y en los revistas y periódicos. Así que estamos esperando a ver qué hacen los republicanos porque ellos controlan los proyectos legislativos que llevan a voto aquí en la Cámara de Representantes.
There's a great deal of noise, as Linda said. And the bottom line is there's only 15 legislative days to accomplish this before the end of this year. And I don't think this is something that can wait till March. With Christmas coming, with the New Year coming, I think certainly in the Judeo-Christian tradition, this is a time where we look to help folks who are in need. And we have 800,000 individuals in this country right now who are looking for our government to do the right thing. They are cultural Americans. They are every much American as we are, except they don't have that piece of paper. And the president has created this crisis by his announcement of the elimination of the DACA program and has given the Congress 6 months to act. I think it really is, we really need to act within these next 15 legislative days to make this a reality. I hope we do.
For Congresswoman Sanchez, were you done? Different topic.
Taxes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Yes.
A lot of us are covering the sexual harassment hearings today.
Mhm.
We also have been around long enough to remember this came to the public before during Clarence Thomas, and it doesn't seem like Congress has tightened its policy against harassment. What are your thoughts and how come?
Sure. I don't know the how come. I do know that sexual harassment in every workplace that I've ever been in, it exists. I used to practice employment discrimination law. I used to serve on the ethics committee here in Congress. So it's not surprising or shocking to me that it exists here. The degree to which it exists, I think, is starting to shock people across the country. And it's not just in Hollywood, and it's not just in Congress, and it's not just in Wall Street. It's on the factory shop floor. It's in every workplace. Everywhere where there is economic advantage, that somebody can take advantage of that, you are going to see this problem exist. I had my own experience with that as a new member of Congress, and when you are new to a workplace, you don't always understand what the policies and procedures are or what the avenues for reporting those kinds of incidences are, and I think there are a number of bills that have recently been introduced that are requiring sexual harassment training of all offices, members and staff, a renewal of that training on a 2-year basis. I think getting information out to employees about what avenues are available to them to file complaints if they so choose to do, shortening the time period of filing complaints, I think also makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of very tricky issues that staff have to navigate up here, and by the way, it's not just female staffers that experience this, male staffers as well. And I think that the sort of floodgates have been opened in terms of the people who are willing to talk about their experiences, and we can learn from that to figure out how do we tighten up the procedures to make it a fairer process for complainants, because I think many don't come forward because of the fear of reprisal, the fear of losing their job and the economic impact of that, the fear of being blacklisted throughout their career. And I think now is finally at that turning point in our country where people are starting to take complaints seriously, and people are starting to agitate for a fair process for those who have been the victims of sexual assault or sexual harassment.
Sobre el acoso sexual y su experiencia personal, si nos puede dar un poquito en español, por favor.
Okay, let me try to translate this. Cuando yo apenas llegué al Congreso, era joven de 33 años en el Congreso, había uno de mis colegas que me hacía propuestas inapropiadas de una manera enseguida. Y yo no sabía en dónde podía ir yo a quejarme de esto. Entonces tomé la decisión de no estar con él, junto con él en cuartos solos, de no tratar de encontrarlo aquí en el Congreso. Y como una joven que apenas había llegado, no sabía qué podía hacer, esa era la única forma en que yo pensaba que que podía trabajar aquí y quedarme aquí en el Congreso.
¿Cree que estas declaraciones, esta apertura ahora puede generar un cambio?
Espero que sí, espero que las historias que están contando personas aquí, que les han puesto la noticia a los que lo hacen aquí en el Congreso, que van a saber que ya no van a tener esa protección del silencio, que mujeres y hombres también van a ya decidir jamás voy a decir lo que está pasando, y espero que vamos a tener un sistema, que vamos a crear un sistema que sea más justo para las víctimas, para que pueden quejarse y ver que estas personas, que realmente algo les pasa a estas personas.
Can you speak to a moment about on the tax bill? Both of you represent urban or suburban districts here, but there's concern how it hits those areas in particular. But the key to Democrats winning the House in 2006 was that there were Democrats who won in rural areas. There are some who argue that this bill works out a little better for those in rural areas versus suburban areas. Can you talk about the politics of this as it pertains to Democrats trying to get back the House if they can't might make inroads in the suburban areas, but maybe not in the rural?
Well, I don't know why we have to pit rural middle-class people against urban middle-class people. Middle class is middle class. Why we have to pit middle-class rural folks in upstate New York against middle-class suburban folks in New York City. That's the cry to my Republican colleagues in New York State through the elimination of the SALT deduction, the state and local tax deduction. That's what it's really doing. I know that we have an allegiance to our country, but there is some sense of allegiance to the states we come from as well that I don't see represented in terms of the support for the elimination of these tax deductions. And not only it pertains to the elimination of SALT, but how we take away the tax deduction for teachers and their supplies, how we take away the tax deduction from students and their interest on their tuition, how the Republican bill caps the mortgage interest deduction at $500,000 in my congressional district, middle-class district, where the cost of housing is substantially higher than it is in other parts of New York State, for instance. That hurts middle-class people. So why are we pitting middle-class people against each other, all to give a huge tax cut to the wealthiest people in the nation who don't need a tax cut? They're not begging us for a tax cut, but they're the ones who benefit the most. I think it's appalling to play this class warfare game with the middle class itself. We know that in New York State, 22% of the middle class will see a tax increase. We know that 36 million households in the United States will see a tax increase if the Republican bill were to become law. That is not millionaires who will see a tax increase. That's middle class, working class Americans who will see their taxes increase if the Republican bill becomes law. So this is personal. I've said this to my colleagues from New York State, Mr. Reed, Mr. Collins, that this is a very personal issue. This hits people in the most personal way, their pocketbooks. And understand that we recognize when that discrimination is taking place and when that class warfare is being played, pitting middle-class person against a middle-class person. It's the same in California, it's the same in Illinois, the same in my good friends in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. It's immoral what they're doing, quite frankly. It's dividing America.
Has the CBO scored some of these Republican proposals?
I believe there has, I don't know if the full score, there's not a full score from CBO, but joint tax has given us indications to what the impact would be.
I would just like to add that, a lot of hay is made over the fact that the blue states are going to be impacted through things like the elimination of the state and local tax deduction. All states are going to be impacted by that because middle-class families in all states will feel that pinch in terms of not being able to claim that deduction. Does it impact higher cost states more? Yeah, to some degree it does. In California, for example, the average deduction for state and local taxes is $18,000. You remove that, you've removed a big deduction that most middle class families claim. And I think that when the public understands what's in this bill that harms working families versus who the true beneficiaries of the bulk of the tax cuts are, they're going to be really angry. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but people will pay taxes if they think the system is fair, if they think that everybody is paying according, to their ability to pay, that it's proportional, that it's balanced. And if you look at the Republican plan, it's hugely out of balance. To take away somebody's medical expense deduction, which hits seniors particularly hard, seniors who are dealing with things like nursing home care for Alzheimer's or for Parkinson's or families that have a loved one with cancer that have unusually high costs, they're getting that deduction removed. Why? So that we can eliminate the estate tax for people with estates of billions and millions of dollars. I think when the public understands what they lose and what others gain, there's going to be the justified outrage that members of the Ways and Means Committee had last week when we saw this bill come through. We think that there's a fair, balanced way to do tax cuts. We think that there's a fair, better way to try to grow our economy than to just wish and hope for these, highly unlikely growth numbers. And when we met with the president and we had our first conversation about tax, which happened just a couple months ago, because Democrats have pretty much been excluded from the process. I said, well, what's the plan B if the growth doesn't hit 3%? Because the president was promising, I think we can get it up to 6%. And I said, well, what happens if we don't? What happens if we don't is that we have trillions of dollars in debt, and then we have to come back and figure out how do we pay for everything that we need when we've got these trillions of dollars of debt. And I'll tell you what the Republicans have been very clear about. Chairman Brady said it on Morning Joe. We'll have to go back and cut entitlements. Entitlements like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those are things that middle-class families rely on. So it's coming out of middle-class hides one way or the other. They're just not upfront about it. And they think this magical, math called dynamic scoring and this wishful thinking about growth projections is going to gloss over the fact that they're blowing a huge hole in our budget in order to give tax cuts to those people who don't need it.
Just one last point, I think, on this. If you look at the point that 36 million households will see a tax increase under this plan, and they want to eliminate the estate tax that affects 0.002%, two tax households in every 1,000 households. Where's the moral justification for that? That the middle class would subsidize perpetual wealth in this nation? That's not what the country was founded on. We already know the state taxes as they exist right now, the first almost $6 million in a single payer family, and double that in a joint filing household, that covers almost $11 million of an estate which is, first of all, tax-free, exempt. And it's only dollars after that that are taxed at the estate tax rate. So this notion or idea that saving, ranchers and farmers, we've already saved ranchers and farmers in the adjustments we made in the estate tax. This is baloney. The bottom line is 36 million households will see a tax increase to give away to the wealthiest in this country in the estate tax, and to lower the corporate rate to 20%. Special interest corporations getting a tax cut, being able to offshore jobs overseas at half that rate is obscene to the American taxpayer.
Can you both address the question of Puerto Rico and the crisis in Puerto Rico?
The crisis continues. I had colleagues from New York State visit just last week. They were in San Juan and beyond. The crisis, we know that San Juan had lost power for a number of days. It is only recently restored again. That 1 million folks who had gotten power back had lost it for a bit, and it's coming back slowly. But the crisis itself continues. The ability for individuals, we had hospitals in San Juan that had lost power during operations. There's a real ongoing humanitarian crisis in Puerto Rico. We were hoping to hear from the governor today. I believe he's in Washington today. He wasn't able to join us at our caucus. We hope to have him in the future. We have heard from the mayor just recently. This is an ongoing crisis. This is not going to end anytime soon, and our government needs to be fully vested and invested in its recovery. And Linda?
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of do the cross-section of where taxes interact with the tragedy that continues in Puerto Rico. I offered an amendment in the Ways and Means markup to extend the child tax credit to theirs in Puerto Rico, because right now they only get to claim it after the third child. Here in the States, the contiguous United States, we get to claim it after the first. So extending that kind of tax relief could do a lot towards helping families get back on their feet. Voted down, party line vote, Republicans rejected it, now not part of the bill. There are many ways in which we can be helping the situation in Puerto Rico, but our unequal treatment of them in our tax code, in veterans benefits, in Medicare reimbursements, puts that perpetually at a disadvantage. And until we start recognizing the people of Puerto Rico as U.S. citizens that are part of our country and treating them with that kind of equality, those kinds of the disaster recovery is going to continue to be slow and difficult for people to get back on their feet. Oh gosh, you're killing me this morning. Hay muchas cosas que podemos hacer para ayudar con lo que está pasando en Puerto Rico. Por ejemplo, la semana pasada, cuando estuvimos discutiendo el plan de impuestos de los republicanos, yo ofrecí un cambio a ese proyecto de ley que daría la oportunidad de personas en Puerto Rico de usar the Child Tax Credit, que ahorita los de Puerto Rico solamente lo pueden usar después de que tengan su tercer hijo. Aquí en los estados lo podemos usar después de tener un hijo, y es una manera de tratar con desigualdad a la gente de Puerto Rico, pero hay muchos otros ejemplos, por ejemplo, con los beneficios que reciben los veteranos, los de Puerto Rico reciben menos. Y si realmente queremos ver a Puerto Rico I don't know how you say rebuild in Spanish, reconstruir. Hay muchas maneras en que podemos ayudar a la gente allí, pero no lo estamos haciendo. Los republicanos aquí siempre ven a los de Puerto Rico no como ciudadanos de los Estados Unidos, sino como algo diferente, y les tratan de una manera diferente, y hasta que podemos tratarlos igual va a ser mucho más difícil para la gente de Puerto Rico de reconstruir sus vidas.
Does that come in different supplementals? How is that provided if it's passed?
Well, it's not clear yet how that, if that, first of all, will be met. We hope that we rise to the occasion to restore Puerto Rico not only to where it was prior to these storms, these hurricanes, but that they're more resilient, to withstand future storms. But these storms are not going away. And I think that also needs to be part of that discussion. What has been happening so far, that it's been happening in tranches in terms of the needs and the immediate needs. But we're under no illusion that this is going to be something that's going to be solved tomorrow. This is something that's going to be an ongoing project for the American people to restore their fellow citizens in the Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico. It's going to be ongoing, and we welcome hearing from the governor. We had hoped to hear from him in our caucus today. That wasn't. It was unfortunate the schedule could not be maintained. But we do look forward to hearing his testimony before the Senate today and getting a greater understanding in terms of how he believes those needs should be met.
Thank you.
Thank you all.